On Second Shot, we tackle 2 new headlines every week to find out what kind of wisdom the world is dishing out today. And we want you to be a part of that. When you see a headline you want to take a second shot at, or if you're looking for advice, or just want to tell us what you think of the show, email us at secondshotcast@gmail.com. If you like what you hear, rate us on iTunes. This helps us move up in the ratings so more people will see us. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the show so that the new episodes will get straight to you every single Friday. We love you. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
There's a lot of news in the world today.
News that might surprise you, startle you, upset, or maybe impress.
News that's not always for the faint of heart.
That's why the man who failed his way to success, Heath Oakes, is stepping up.
Tackling today's headlines with ignorance on fire in a way only a millennial mogul can.
Take off your sport coat, grab a beer, and enjoy the conversation.
This is Second Shot with your host, Heath Oakes.
Today is beyond a special day, Matt. I'm telling you, it's huge. I didn't know, I couldn't have said about 2 years ago that I would have the privilege to be able to sit next to this, our guest today. But I'd like to welcome in the studio Mr. Bob Burg.
Hey, Heath, it's so great to be with you. Thank you.
Guys, this is a huge deal. We got Matt in, and Zach's not here. I think he's playing hooky, acting like he's sick, or what is he doing?
I was hoping you weren't going to say it's a special day because Zach's not here, although it is sort of a special day.
I mean, you said that, not me.
All right, I'll take the heat on that one.
All right, good. I'm super pumped about today, honestly. The guy next to us has sold, over 1 million books, and his book, the first book, the original, the main one, had a lot to do with my wife and I. It was a connection we both had in a big way. I believe that the book, when I read it, was a very it transformed a lot about me and who I was, and helped me, inspired me in so many ways. And I've bought it for all my sales teams over the years. I've done all of that. So when I got to and Jenny and I met, and we both found out that was a book that we both loved, and then she y'all kind of had connected, and
Twitter.
Yeah, and on Twitter and stuff. But then you come from the news business and all of those things, which was awesome. And we got to meet up, and then you were gracious enough to write the front on my book, which I know you get millions of people asking you, and I don't know why you chose to say yes to mine, but I appreciate it. But I've talked about your book several times on this podcast because, honestly, it has had a massive impact on me. And then we're going to talk about that one, and we're going to talk about your newest one, The Influencer, which I just got done reading, and I talked about a little bit a while back, but I want to get into more of it today.
Well, thanks. And I've got to tell you, while I read the book originally because you and Jenny are friends of mine, I was very thankful for having had the honor and the opportunity to read it. And that was the big thing, because I learned a lot in that book. And I think I said to you something either like, I want to be you when I get younger, all right? Since I'm so much older, I can't say when I grow up. But really, the wisdom, and you talk about, ignorance on fire, but I'll tell you, the wisdom that you showed and displayed in that book is I don't care if someone's just starting out in sales, starting out in life, or they're a long-time veteran, they are going to learn from it.
Well,
it was great.
I paid Bob a lot of money to just say what he just said, just so you all know. I wanted to make sure I slid a little something under the table for him. That means a lot coming from somebody who's accomplished what you have. That is for sure. I want to dive into the first one. We're going to do a little bit different this episode, guys, as you know, because what I basically did was I found kind of 2 little headlines, which was basically people giving summaries of these 2 books we're going to talk about. And then on the third segment, we're going to get into more of Bob's story and how he became him. So we're gonna do these headlines based on his books and just banter around them. So the first one, somebody did a summary on the Go Giver, and they basically summed it up. It's a book, it's a parable. So for somebody like me who grew up as a dyslexic kid, reading was tough, right? And so reading was never fun for me. I never liked it. I never read much. And I think that's what had a lot to do with your book, too, that grabbed me, because somebody who's ADD as I am and that can't pay attention much, your book was, it wasn't one of those like, oh, here's these 10 principles to success that are boring, and here's this, like yours was captivating. Yours was, you wanted to turn the next page. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the chapter, you're like, oh, what's going to happen next? Like watching a series on Netflix, right? That's an awesome way. And at that point, I had never seen another book like that. And I read it, I think, in one plane ride. I mean, I couldn't take my eyes from it. And so
And Heath, I've got to say this though too. I have a co-author, John David Mann, who is really the storyteller. He's the leader. I'm a how-to guy. I come from the world of sales. Like, you and I both. And John can take an idea, can take a concept. I mean, you can say the sky is blue, and this guy somehow makes it, into something you want to read. So believe me, it was not.
But
just,
you're both, and both of them are on there. I mean, and I just don't know. I just don't know him.
I understand
That's why.
that. I just don't want to feel like I'm taking all the credit for it.
Yes. And I mean, and you're right. You got to have your pit. And Batman and Robin. If there's, you don't have your backup, you don't have your other side of it, then it's hard to get things going. And you got to have both, right? You got to have the person who can cast it and the person that can really tell it. You know, and if you don't, but that's also how great magic happens is whenever that is paired. And he talks about it in there, just so you know, it's a parable story about a man named Joe who's struggling to make his quarters, and he has this mentor that guides him to all of these different mentors that teach him different laws. So throughout the book, it's this young person's journey to success almost, and he's led by a mentor to these other mentors that teach him these different laws in a very fun, valuable way. And what's interesting is I thought about it as reading the law, the newest one, the Go-Giver Influencer, because one of the laws in the first one is law of influence.
Right? Yeah.
We talked about on the last podcast, Bob, when you and John David Mann putting this book together. Why was it these 5 things? Why those 5 laws? What was there something that in your own story that made those come together to be the most important?
Well, I had been, an entrepreneur, salesperson for many years. John also great entrepreneur, and we both learned a lot of lessons, made lots of mistakes, of course. And John, who had been a journalist for quite a while, which is one reason he's such a great writer, had interviewed tons and tons of successful people. I had gotten to, just by being a speaker, appear on stage with people who were, CEOs and industry leaders and great athletes and all these people, and I'm always asking questions because I'm always wanting to learn.
Yep.
And plus, I read a lot of books. I'm a voracious reader, and I love reading success stories. I've studied success.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that if people will do, and people will do consistently, you can't not be successful.
But let me ask you this. I can point out people that are quote-unquote successful, right, monetarily and stuff, that big time, that they are not very good people. Tell me, how does that happen?
They're not necessarily successful. When you think about it, they may have. There are different contexts, I guess you could say, of success. I mean, there's financial, there's physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, and typically success principles work across the board. Okay, true. But there are people who maybe focus or have some sort of talent or some sort of environment where they've been able to be successful in one area.
Yep.
And they may not even know why they are.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But it's not duplicable.
No, they can't replicate that to somebody else.
Exactly.
It was like that recent article that I wanted to just, Matt, I guarantee you saw this article and go, I guarantee you Heath wanted to just slap somebody when I saw that article, which was the Kylie Jenner self-made billionaire at 20 years old. Or Kylie Kardashian, whatever the heck her name is. The Kardashian youngest one said self-made billionaire. I go, self-made? Like, that's...
She knows how to run an Instagram account, I guess you could say.
And it's like, good for you. You did well. You made something. But let's not go to the extent of self-made.
Right. I'm all for her success. If you're bringing value to the marketplace, absolutely. But yeah, I'd say self-made is stretching it just a tiny bit. Yeah.
Exactly. I ain't hating on you, okay? I wish I had $900 million
I want you to be
too,
successful,
okay?
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to go as far as saying you were self-made,
That's a stretch.
I mean, even people who are self-made aren't really self-made, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
And they are.
That's true. So true. That's a very good point, and it really is. And, one of the 2 laws on here that I wanted to hit on, and the law of value, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Then the law of compensation, your income is determined by how many people you serve. I'm sure you grew up, I mean, in all of it, listening to Ziegler. I mean, and
Sure.
obviously, and Ziegler was always my favorite quote. You can have what you want in life. You help
So
enough
you can
other people
have
get what they
everything in
want.
life you want, Heath, if you just help enough other people get what they want.
That is literally a perfect impersonation.
Because I listened to his tape when I was first starting out in sales, right? And I floundered for the first, 6 months or I don't know, whatever it was, because let's just say the training where I was working, it was negligible at best, right? And so I remember getting a book by Zig and a book by Tom Hopkins.
Yep.
Okay, then I went to a Zig seminar and I got his tapes.
Yep.
And I started listening to his tapes again. And remember, tapes, by the way, for those listening, tapes were these things we had way back in the day. They were kind of one step above an 8-track tape. And
I listened to his CDs.
Yeah, right. And I would just listen over and over and over again. Absolutely. To the point that, I could pretty much do those all of his vignettes and his teachings. Now, of course, like anything else, he's teaching great principles. You can't go in there and talk like Zig.
Yeah.
But you take the principles that he's sharing and you talk like you, and it's amazing how it,
Well, Bob, and that's the thing is we come from different generations. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is a lot of times in my generation, people will act like your generation can't teach us anything because you don't know what it's like now. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's a myth I have tried to bust is because I have 3 business mentors. They're all over 60 years old and have taught me a tremendous amount. They're literally key with it all. And I try to make younger people understand those Zig principles are still relevant today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the laws of value, the law of compensation, the things that you talk about in the Go Giver books are just as, I don't care if you're a millennial, you're X, you're a Y, you're a Z, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, and we have had a lot of feedback from people who have their children read those books. They'll do them for family study. We've got now it's in different high schools that they'll teach it and so forth. So yeah, I mean the principle. There are principles, there are strategies, there are techniques, there are tactics, and sometimes, but the overall the principles are just universal laws. They're universal truths.
Absolutely,
and they've worked since forever, and they're going to work.
Yep.
Till
they're not
going
to stop.
No. We didn't have Twitter back then, obviously, at that time, so you wouldn't hear that on a Zig tape.
Yeah, exactly.
But you still, when you communicate on Twitter and build relationships on Twitter, which you absolutely can, you still have to ask yourself the question, am I providing value to my either target market, to this person, what have you, with this tweet? Is it serving a purpose? Is it something that people are going to value?
Yep.
That's the same thing.
It is. Putting content
medium.
out there. It's just a different way of putting it out. Well, it's actually an easier access now than it was back then.
Twitter allows us to form a relationship, meet people we otherwise never probably would have had the opportunity to meet, and then be able to build a relationship with that person. It's not that it replaces outbound calling. It's not that it replaces in-person meeting. It's not an either or. It's an and.
Yep. I agree 100%. Yeah. And we're going to keep talking about this, and we're going to talk about the influencer right when we come back from the first segment. So we're back in a minute on the second segment of Second Shot.
He's a suit and tie kind of guy with deep Southern roots. Heath Oaks hosts more of Second Shot coming up on RNCN.
To all of my friends in the great state of Texas, if you have not taken advantage, I have a way to save you a ton of money. I have saved over about $3,000 in the last year, and I have no hassle. Go to energyogre.com, put in the promo code SECONDSHOT. Now listen, promo code SECONDSHOT, and you're going to get a free month just for signing up and saving a ton of money. So don't be crazy. Stop sitting around talking about is this the real deal, and go do it right now. energyogre.com, promo code SECONDSHOT, and a free month. Thanks. Go get it now. Run.
Ready? Aim. Fire. Second Shot is back for another round on RNCN.
So you bust out with the first Go Giver, and how long before you decided to think about your next Go Giver book? Or did you ever even think, or was it just it took off? I mean, I have a feeling you're probably pretty busy for a while with that one, weren't you?
Yeah, and then the publisher came to John and me and asked if we would do they actually signed us to 2 more books.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, in one of the most recent ones I talked about on the podcast not too long ago is the Go Giver Influencer. And in the first Go Giver book, one of the laws was law of influence. And so what I thought about was the interesting dynamics that you were going to do. I was interested in because I knew about the first one, having that law in there and putting it out there. So you must have thought that law was an extremely important one to do a whole book just on influence. And when you talk about Twitter and stuff these days, everybody talks about what an influencer is.
Influencer, right? It's
It goes hand in hand with it all, right? I mean, was any of that in the part of the process?
No, but it's a great point because a lot of people asked us when they heard that was the title, are you talking about being an online influencer?
Yeah.
And no, influence has actually always been around for, and so it was more the generic type of influence, but we wanted to just take it and drive it deeper.
I got to say, I did not expect what I got out of it. I was not expecting that. I think it was kind of a little bit different than what you meant in the law and the influence in the first book, almost, because the Go-Giver influencer was a lot more around almost influencing others in negotiations to actually sales calls. I mean, that was a part of it, but obviously just influence in general. But there was some of that involved, and I wasn't expecting that. So it was like an extra nugget that I got that I didn't think that I was going to get.
Thanks. Yeah, in the first book, The Law of Influence was more about how to build a network of people who know you, who like you, who trust you, who want to do business with you, who want to refer you to others, and so forth. And so it was strictly the business sense of influence in that regard, in that context. In this one, we took it more to an overall, I guess you could say, people skills type of thing. How do you, when you're wanting to influence, which is on a very basic level, influence is simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. What we wanted to sort of get across is that while that may be the definition, it's not really the essence of influence, which is more about pull or attraction, right? Attracting people first to you and then to what, because unless people already trust you, it's going to be hard to influence them in a certain way. So the biggest thing is just discovering, which really that's really selling, discovering what the other person wants, needs, or desires and helping them to get it. And it's only when you can focus on what the other person, how they're going to benefit, that's the only time you're in a position to influence another human being.
But how do you what's the line of when people say, well, influence people, but isn't that manipulation?
Well, so influence itself is just a thing. It's neither good nor bad. Okay.
But when you talk about influencing somebody else,
sure.
right? A lot of people go, well, that's manipulation. You're manipulating people.
Sure. So if you start with influence, okay, now there are two ways to influence someone, to move someone to an action. Okay, you could manipulate, okay, or you could persuade. Both a manipulator and a persuader both understand human interaction, human motivation, what drives people. So you could say that manipulation and persuasion are cousins. Now, one's the evil cousin, persuasion. Manipulation. One's the good cousin, persuasion. But it has everything to do with intent. It's just like gravity, Heath. Gravity is gravity good or bad? Well, gravity's just a thing. Okay, it's a universal law.
If I'm in an airplane in the sky, I don't like it too much.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's good when it keeps us from floating aimlessly up into space. It's bad if we fall out that airplane. Right. Yeah. So, but that's gravity. Just is. It's how it's used.
That's a great point.
Well, I was reading a book, and this book was published in 1987. It was by Dr. Paul W. Sweats. Yeah, exactly. and Dr. Sweats. The book was called The Art of Talking So That People Will Listen. It was much more about listening than it was about talking. But I thought he gave the best, not definition, but explanation of the difference between manipulation and persuasion. Dr. Sweat said manipulation aims at control, not cooperation. It does not consider the good of the other party. It results in a win-lose situation. On the other hand, the persuader is just the opposite. The whole thing about a persuader is they want to build everyone in the process, okay? So people act more responsibly because they're treated as self-directing, responsible individuals. So while a manipulator may not be trying to hurt you, if that's what it takes to get their way, they will. They're I-focused, me-focused. That could never happen with a persuader, because for a persuader to feel good about what they have influenced or persuade you to do, they need to know that you're also coming out ahead and that you feel good about it.
And how do you think that some of the people, because in the book, what's awesome is talking about, it's basically a salesperson and then, almost a gatekeeper, a decision maker, that are both coming in a meeting and
Right.
they are both trying to the salesperson thinks they're the only one trying to get a deal, right? That's how salesperson, you go in decision maker. You don't really think about that person on the other side. Something about what you're bringing to the table may be their last deal.
Right.
And that's kind of really what it brings into the table, that there's actually influence on both sides of it all. And what I like to think about is that I'm a firm believer of, like, I always talk about 10% more. Like, I go, you ain't got to go out there and say, oh, I'm going to change everything about myself tomorrow. Just be 10% better. Like, get 10% at something. So if somebody goes, I'm wanting to gain a little bit more of an influence in situations, what is something they can do to really have a 10% better? Like, what is a simple approach or simple thing to become better at influencing others?
Well, it really begins with ourselves, and that's mastering our emotions. And this is really, Heath, where it all begins, because it's only when we are in control of ourselves, of our emotions.
Matt, does he not sound like he and I've had a couple conversations when we talk about mastering the emotions that we talk about every time, right?
Absolutely. I
love
mean,
it.
I'm starting to realize how influenced you were by this.
Yes. Yes.
But it's interesting because we know how important it is to be able to control our emotions, but we're human beings.
Absolutely.
And we are emotional creatures. We like to think we're logical, and to a certain extent we are, but not. We're pretty emotion driven. We make major decisions based on emotion. We back up those emotional decisions with logic. We rationalize, which is to tell ourselves rational lies, right?
Yep.
And we can make very and when we make bad decisions that way, but we can also let ourselves lose control and be frustrated or angry or whatever because we didn't control our emotions. So what we say is, and I learned this from a leadership speaker who's a friend of mine. Her name is Dondi Scumaci, and I love that she says, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car.
Yep.
In other words, you are the master of your emotions. They are not the master of you.
I love it.
And that's so key. That's the first thing, to be able to master your emotions.
Well, and wouldn't you say that the other is, and I know you would say this because obviously with your books, but you have to give up the control of it. Honestly, will help you to give to others more than yourself. Like give up that control that's fake, that somebody's telling you a lie there, because a lot of people. Not enough. We talked on the last episode. We talked about being selfish, and how that's not a great trait, right? And how influencing others is, until you're somebody who cares about others, you're not going to influence them.
Oh, absolutely. And they know.
Yes.
People generally, not that there aren't some people who can, but you know what? It tends to not be sustainable for them. And those people who are really, they're the phonus balonus, right? They can get a few wins, but not only is it not sustainable, it typically catches up with them. And they have to work a whole lot harder to be successful than people whose character is such that people know they can trust them.
And it's hard in a competitive world these days, and when with the internet, that these people that are quote unquote influencers, that they'll rent Ferraris and stuff and take pictures and say, follow my scheme, you'll make it rich tomorrow, and even their car, right? Like, I believe it's tougher for people coming up in the world to be able to look at at others and not just look at their appearance of things. Like, I'm a guy who dresses good all the time, and I like that, but that makes me feel good. It's I feel, I was 19 years old in business and I looked 10, so like putting a suit on always made me feel like I was older, and so it's something that I've just always done. And unfortunately, just because somebody looks the part does not mean they are the part.
Oh, absolutely.
And out of your years of wisdom, is there a way to discern who that is and who that is not? Like when you're looking for somebody to maybe help influence you, like if you're looking for that mentor, somebody to help influence you, how to figure out who's the real deal and not.
Okay, well, while I don't think there's any one total magic button foolproof way, I think it comes down to anything else. When we're buying something, we want to find out, do other people say, referrals. I mean, you and I are
Absolutely.
both, right? We're in sales, right?
Big
so
time.
we know. And so when other people, when you have a great reputation and a sustainable reputation, there's lots of other people. Now, again, could people plant a lot of it? Sure. I mean, there's all sorts of schemes and all sorts of schemers. That's the world we live in, and that's just how it is.
And they're just more visible nowadays.
But they're more visible. And I think it's more difficult for someone to sustainably be dishonest.
That's true.
Yeah.
It is. It may be. It's worse that your kids have access to seeing more people if they're fake or not. But it is true that, back in 1987, if somebody was a con man, they could move to Kansas and be a con man. Nowadays, you look up that name, it's there.
We used to say about salespeople who did that, they'd work themselves out. Eventually, everyone knew them in their territory, right? So they had to leave and start all over again. It was still more difficult than a referral-based business, but they could leave and just work hard at bringing new business. Now, you really can't do that. Now, and a good friend of mine, Joe Calloway, who's a great speaker and author, he wrote Be the Best at What Matters Most, and he wrote a category of one. He said, a great compliment is when someone says, I heard from the internet that you're really good.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
I asked the internet, and I heard you were really good.
It's true. Because if you go Google it, and dude, I told Jenny the other day there was something that I was working on, and I said, I hope that they hire a private investigator or something to go check me out because, and I go, that's one of the best things about, there's a lot of people you can ask that probably don't like me, that maybe they just don't like maybe I've said something to them wrong, or they just don't like my personality. That's going to happen, right?
Sure.
But there's nobody that can say I have screwed them. Mm-hmm. There's nobody that can say that I did them wrong. Like I didn't hold up my end on a bargain. They may not like me, but they're not going to say that. And that's something I'm super proud of, and that I love, the internet test and the whatever test. And you're right. I never even thought about that. It may be easier to have bad people in the spotlight, but bad people can't continue that con nowadays.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah. And so we're going to be back in a minute on the third segment, get to know Bob and how he kind of got here to this point some more, and talk a little bit more about it. See you in a minute.
Now that's what I call ignorance on fire. More of Second Shot with Heath Oaks still to come.
You guys have been listening to Second Shot and hearing us talk about it. You need to go pick up my book, Ignorance on Fire, A Journey of Failing Your Way to Success. You can get it on Amazon in a paper book. You can also hear this beautiful voice of mine in audiobook style on Audible or anywhere you're going to get your audiobooks. Guys, this book took a lot of time to put into it, and I believe it can really be some life-changing stuff to help you on your path to success. And hopefully you're going to fail your way to success just like I did. Ignorance on Fire, A Journey of Failing Your Way to Success. Amazon.com, Audible.com, audiobooks, paper books, everything. Get it, share it with your people, and I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Go pick it up today.
Kick off your boots or suit up. The choice is yours. Welcome back to Second Shot on RNCN.
I have to tell you, Bob, that, as we go into this segment, I want them to kind of know just a little bit about how you got here. That I got to tell you just honestly how grateful I am that you would take the time out today. You're here in Dallas for a conference. I know you're a super busy person, got a lot going on, and it means a lot to me that you would take the time out to come do this. I don't take that lightly at all. I promise you I don't at all.
My absolute honor and pleasure.
And I'm so excited about my listeners to, get to know you a little bit more. And the thing is sometimes, in life when you have something that maybe you've read or you've done something and followed somebody, never met them, and you meet them and it's a big letdown in some way, you hear about it. Well, to me, it was nothing but back whenever I finally got to meet you after reading your book so many years ago and all of that it was beyond my expectations even. I think that you're actually as real as everything comes off to be, which is huge and not easy to find, these days. And so I commend you on that and being a real person and actually, walking in what you are preaching and so quote unquote preaching and talking about.
That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Which is huge. But I'd like for you to kind of give our listeners a little bit of kind of, where you grew up, kind of, what's your story? How'd you get here? How did you end up being this big national, author and big deal?
Well, my first career was broadcasting. So I started out in radio, and I was in sports, and was able to to land a job at a very a Midwestern, very small market TV station after sending out about 125 resume tapes, all with and getting rejections every day. And I finally found an opening.
My wife's told me that sounds very similar to hers.
And they asked, well, could you do news instead of sports? And I said, sure. Actually, I don't know if I did sports that well, so I figured I can't do news any. So I started out as the 6 o'clock in the morning anchor and field reporter, and worked my way up to the 10 o'clock news spot. But I really wasn't very good at it. I mean, I was 24 years old. I really knew nothing about the news, and I kind of look back and realize I didn't care. I think I was probably a bit too positive for the medium anyway. My idea of a good newscast opening would have been to say something like, "Hi everyone, I'm Bob Burg in the news tonight. Everything's great. Go to bed. We'll let you know if something comes up." So it wasn't
an advertiser would be running out the door.
So it wasn't long before I was out of news, out of television, and what I like to say, graduated into sales.
Yeah.
And that's when I came across books by Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, and others. And within a real short period of time, my sales began to go through the roof. And the only reason, Heath, is because there was now a methodology I had, right?
Yeah, a system to follow.
To this day, I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key is predictability.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, you just simply need to do A until you get B.
But how many people want to go start at Z themselves, even though they know that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's the catch.
Mind-blowing.
That's the catch. And really from there, I started realizing that to get really good at sales, you also had to kind of improve yourself.
Yep.
So I started just reading every book I could and listening to every, tape that I could. And just loved it. And I loved sales. And eventually worked my way up to sales manager of a company, started sharing with people what was working for me, and eventually started speaking on the topic. And, been doing that for quite a while now.
So how long, how many years have you really been just writing and speaking as your main deal?
About 30 years.
Wow.
And my first book, which was Endless Referrals, that came out about 4 or 5 years after I started. And that was really as a positioning tool, because I was at a National Speakers Association meeting, and a few people said to me, Berg, if you want to get to the next level, you've got to write a book. It's going to help you position yourself, the whole thing. And they were right.
Yeah.
And so that was totally utilitarian. I had a reason for writing that book. I didn't particularly want to, but I felt it was going to help, and it did.
If you were to say, thinking back at whenever you were making that transition, obviously it had to be a difficult transition, right? I mean, going from just sales to saying, I'm going to make a living being a speaker.
Right.
I mean, that's not that's a hard thing to do. What can you talk about a time where you were closest to quitting and why you didn't?
Absolutely. I remember that as though it was yesterday. And it was probably 3 or 4 years after I started. Now, I'd mentioned National Speakers Association. That's where I learned the business of speaking. Not so much how to speak, although that's one of the things that you learn, but the business of speaking. But I was in the business for about 3 or 4 years. And I was a one-person show, so I'm on the phone all the time. Again, that's how we did it back then. And we sold in prospect, qualify, send, call, your follow, doing all the different things, okay? And finally get a booking, and then from, you do it like that. But when you're not selling and you're speaking, you're not selling, and so it would go up and down and up and down. And so several years in the business, it was at the point where, and I was loving it, but I certainly wasn't making enough money because it didn't matter what I made. I was bringing in less than I needed to.
Yeah.
And I remember
tend to be important.
Yeah,
there.
and I remember one of the other speakers who I heard at a National Speakers Association meeting talking about that happened to her in her first few years, and then she became massively successful. But she said she used to go home and look at the want ads, thinking, am I going to have to get another job? And I was doing that. I was having to look at the want ads thinking, at a certain point, I'm just going to have to get another job selling and maybe try to build the speaking business on the weekend, which means I wouldn't be able to. Plus, I was loving the business and I didn't want to. So I used to have this thing. And so it was a Friday afternoon, and I kind of realized if I didn't get book a speech, that I was going to have to that weekend have a serious talk with my newspaper and look in the help want ads. And I felt so bad about it. And I remember it was near the end of the day. as I was depressed as could be.
Yeah.
And I remember something I used to do when I was in traditional sales when I first started, and that was what I called one more call.
Yep.
And what that was no matter where I was at the end of the day, when it was time to go home, everything was over, that things were closing up, I'd make one more call. I'd stop at one more place. I'd meet one more person. It wasn't one more sale.
Yep.
It was one more call, although it's amazing how those would end up being sales. So I decided this is what I'm going to do. One more call before going home for the weekend and getting the want ads out. And I opened up my a National Directory of Trade Professional Associations, which was the big book back then where you looked up, and I just opened it to a page. And I saw the association. I said, they're not going to need what I have. I couldn't imagine them needing, but that wasn't the point. It was one more call. Dial the number, got through to somebody there, and told this person what I did, and she said, well, you know, it's interesting. We have 42 what they call sections, which were states, 42 sections. She said, and we have them do continuing education. We'd never done that topic before. Would you be interested in coming in to speak for us? You know, and it's like, oh, I think I, might be able to consider that,
Yeah, let me see. Let me check with my assistant. Yeah.
Well, yeah. My assistant being me, and the answer is yes. Yeah. And so that actually, over the next 3 years, I did enough. I think I did something like 32 of the 42 sections, was enough to keep me in the business so I could hire someone. I could still do my sales. I could go out there, but I had someone, and that put me to the point where I was now able to be a full-time professional speaker and not be thinking of want ads.
And that's called discipline. When people ask about discipline and what that is when you're depressed, when you're ready to give up on whatever you're doing, but you make a decision to do one more call, no matter how depressed and how much you want to give up. Because I think a fake and a lie that a lot of people don't realize is they may look at people like myself and you that are ultimately, I would say, majority of the time, positive people, that we never get depressed, that we never get down.
Of course.
Absolutely we do. But the discipline to go, I'm going to get past that is the difference of the key, don't you think?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And and it's interesting. I have another sort of where I have a disagreement with so much of the personal development movement when they try to say things like, oh, everything's great, all the time. Or, no, of course it's not. We're human beings. It's a mess half the time.
Yes.
Or, when they say something, oh, embrace change. Change is good. I hate change. I like to get to a certain point and not change because I've got it down, right? I've got the system down.
Don't you wish that was true?
Right, but you got to anyway. It's not a matter of whether you like it or not. But you've got to embrace the fact, or at least acknowledge the fact that you don't like it. Yep. That's okay. It's, are you going to do it anyway?
Bob, if you had a choice, if you could wave a magic wand and you could make life fair, or you can make life unfair, what would you do and why?
I would say this. I would, there's a great commercial on TV for a college, and I'm trying to think exactly what he says. He says, talent is, and this is not, I'm not quoting it correctly, but talent is everywhere, is given out in equal amounts. Opportunity is not.
Yep.
And the fact is, it's true.
Yep.
Absolutely, it's true. Should it be that way? Who knows?
Yeah, but you get to wave the wand and make it whatever you want.
I would always like to see equality of opportunity.
Yep.
To me, that's what it's all about. And and by the way, I would like to see utopia if possible. That's another thing. Well, we don't want utopia because then it would be too hard. No, I want utopia. Yeah. But what I realize is it's not there.
Yes.
And so what we need to do is and this is why I love free market capitalism.
Yes.
Free market capitalism is the only economic system, where force is not involved. Not if it's free market.
Absolutely.
I'm not talking about cronyism where people buy influences. No, free market. And it's where anybody from anywhere, if they are willing to make themselves of value economically to others and work hard enough at it, they can succeed.
I agree. And I think it's absolutely impossible not to succeed, to continue to give to others above yourself. I think at someday and some point it will all come back down and help you in some way, and that's what the whole thing about the Go Giver movement and series. And y'all have heard me talk about it 100 times, so if you don't after this episode, finally go get the Go Giver books. You're going to be wanting to hand them out to everybody you know, and giving them all of them. And I want you to tell everybody, Bob, where they can hook up with you at. And you've got the Go Giver podcast. You guys go subscribe to his podcast, The Go Giver. Buy his books everywhere, where they can find you at, where they can connect with you, where are all those things at?
Yeah, it's all at The Go Giver, without the hyphen, thegogiver.com. And when they're on that site, they can scroll down to the podcast if they'd like. I'm hoping you're going to come on the podcast soon and tell your story.
I'd love to.
And then they can get it. They can get chapters 1 and 2 of most of my books, including the new one.
Just go buy them. It's worth it.
And then. And everything else that they can connect
You're
with
big
me
on Twitter,
LinkedIn, and so forth.
You're big on Twitter. That's why you can connect really with Bob on Twitter. He responds. He actually talks to people. He is on there at Bob Burg, right? Or is it at Real Bob Burg?
No, it's at Bob Burg. And then we also have a Facebook Live show called Go Giver Influencers, and you can connect with me on Facebook at facebook.com/BurgBob and tune into the show every Thursday at 2 o'clock Central Time.
That's awesome. I appreciate you coming on. I really do. Honestly, it's a huge deal for you to be here, and I think my listeners are going to take a lot from it. And I'm telling you guys, if you don't go get the books, you're crazy. I've told you 100 times, right, Matt?
I think you've talked about his books more than you've talked about your own.
Yeah, he's right there
run
under
ads
Zig.
for your books.
They always give me with Zig, too. So you know where to find me at Ignorance on Fire at Heath Oaks, anywhere you can. Bob, thank you again so much. I appreciate it.
Heath.
And we'll see you guys next time. Love y'all.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.